I got a couple of Tiger things to talk about here, and this will probably be the next segment that we'll break down here. So the Tigers went and did it again. They gave me some hope, right? Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. I'm like Michael Corleone in The Godfather 3, which is not a real movie. It doesn't actually exist. It's not real. I'm quoting a fake. It's a deep fake. Anyway, so the Tigers over the past couple of weeks have become the hottest team in baseball. They've won 10 out of their last 14. They've won 3 series in a row, including a 4-game set against the Guardians and a 3-game set over this past weekend against the Dodgers. Game 2 of which I was at in a crazy 9th inning comeback where they were down 9-4, managed to come back and win the game 11-9. And then the next day, they're down 3-2 going into the ninth. They come back and walk that game off in crazy fashion. Like, it's like they find their way to win. And look, I said this time last week when they were losing to the Guardians, a game that they almost won, by the way. They ended up losing that game just 8-9. Like, they came back in that game, surprisingly. And I said at the time, maybe this is just sort of a mirage. We had our fun. It was enjoyable. We had a good weekend series against the Reds. We had our little fun. We barely beat the Guardians the day before. But we ended up winning that series. We ended up blowing the Guardians out that week, 10-1. Like, this offense is capable of doing that sort of thing. Now, granted, basically every offense is capable of doing that sort of thing in baseball. You play over 100 games. So eventually, at one point, you're going to find a game where you're hitting the ball like you're using a tennis racket. But all of that is to say, there's something brewing, I would say, with this like weird like core of guys who this team just doesn't die, right? Like, and this is somewhat emblematic of, I wouldn't say exactly where they were at last year because they were worse off at this point last year, but this year it just feels like at every moment that you want them to just die, they just come crawling back. I don't know how to describe it because I really haven't seen this from this team in a very long time. Right now, in the standings, they are just 3 games under 500, 47-50. That's their best record at the All-Star break since, I want to say, 2016, where they were 1 game out of going to the playoffs. And right now, they're 12 games out of winning their division, so that's largely out of the question. But in the wild card, they're 7.5 games. Yeah, there's 7 games out of the wild card. Also not exactly super likely, but a little bit more likely. But I have a question, I guess, that I'm not sure about how comfortable I am feeling this way, but it seems like maybe there's something of like the machinations or not the machinations. That's not exactly the right word. Like, there's like this weird kind of core that is formed. And that is in Vierling, Perez, Green, and Keith. And now look, Riley Green's an all-star this year. He's had a fantastic year. He's easily the best player on the team. Matt Vierling, I kind of have always liked him. At least last year, I thought he was a fine player. He, seemed to be a pretty decent, above average bat. This year, it's like he is like the embodiment of the team in my mind, where it's like, he just does not die. Like, he does not, like, he refuses to just, like, bottom out. Now, is his average blowing you away? No. But it's also not, like, bottom of the league. It's still, like, I want to say it's a little above league average. He's batting 248. His OPS is 726. Not amazing, but it's also not terrible. The other thing is, he's got 12 home runs. He's second on the team. Again, not blowing you away with that, but it is what it is. And he plays a myriad of positions. He can play third base. He can play outfield. He can play first base, I'm pretty sure. Like, they're able to utilize him in a variety of ways. Now, is he, this electric foundational piece that you need to keep around? No, but he is providing help offensively and in some ways defensively. Like he fulfills a role, I guess is the point. And he fulfills it at an above average level. Now on Colt Keith is a guy who has absolutely turned it on to the point where he is now batting 253 with a 703 OPS. Now that OPS does not blow you away, but I mean, if you go back and like he had just that terrible start, he had a bad month of June as well. And I don't like to play the game of just get rid of the stats where they were bad and then look at how good his stats were. But the fact that his batting average is where it is now, and the fact that he has, you know, he's now one home run away from double digit home runs with 9 homers on the year and 37 ribbies, like he has started to show that he's about ready to kind of go off, if you will. And I would not be surprised if down this second stretch, Colt Keith, one of these months or one of these weeks, he's, AL player of the month or AL player of the week or one of these things where, he just comes out of nowhere and he hits like 3 bombs in a week or that's maybe not all that impressive. It's like 4 or 5 bombs in a week, right? Like it seems like every game he's hitting a home run or something like that where he's just going crazy. And this is kind of what he did in the minor leagues. Like he would kind of take a little bit for him to get going, but then you just every other day it was like, oh, Colt Keith hit a home run, Colt Keith hit a triple, he hit a double, Colt Keith walk off, whatever. Like he has started to show the signs of a foundational piece, in my opinion. And obviously, they believe he is a foundational piece. They extended him before the season even started. And look, I was fairly concerned about this. I was like, okay, is this really the right move? Is this what we want to see happen? And he has started to assuage the concerns I had about signing him before he even played. And then on the flip side, not exactly, you still have a guy like Wenzel Perez who batting above league average, a 710 OPS, 260 average, not a lot of home runs, but he's a switch hitter. He can play the outfield, and he certainly exceeded expectations, I think, for a lot of people, where he's playing at an above, like he's playing as a reliable player. He's kind of like a more controllable and maybe a little bit less uh versatile, at least in terms of where you can play him in the field. He's like Matt Vierling, where it's like every time you want to think, oh, okay, he's just about to bottom out, he just doesn't. And I don't know how realistic that is. I don't know if he has any real future here, but it is what it is. And also, I should mention Justin Henry Malloy. He's hit 5 home runs in 33 games. That's pretty good. His batting average is not all that great, but his OPS is 726. So you're like, okay, this is clearly a all or nothing kind of player. At least as of right now, we'll see if he can increase that average. I would like to see him be a more consistent hitter in general. But as it stands, Hen is still kind of developing. We'll see if maybe he can, as he gets more at bats, you see a kind of Colt Keith-esque growth in Justin Henry Malloy. He was a guy that I remember when we traded for him. I want to say there was Braves fans who were like, "Oh man, he was one of our good prospects." That's a pretty decent trade for I was gonna say the Pistons, for the Tigers there. So far he's been kind of but he's shown some flashes, that's for sure. But I wanted to also take all this where we feel like we're almost over that hill. And then I want to talk about the Tigers draft. So the Tigers take Bryce Rayner, who is a shortstop out of high school, for the 11th pick, and their subsequent 2 picks after that on the first night of the draft, going into the second round, they take 2 high school pitchers. Now, far from me to say that taking high school players is a bad idea. I got no problem taking high school players. I got no problem taking players from any if they're high school, college, I don't care. It does not matter to me. If you believe they're the best player available, then you take the player. I don't care if it means we have to wait a little bit longer. If he's gonna be impactful, take the guy. That's why I didn't yell and scream about Max Clark, where it's like, yeah, I mean, like it'd be one thing if Max Clark was a college player and he comes up and he sucks, right? Like I don't right now he's a high school bat, so he's got a lot of runway. But if he pans out, you could have a second Riley Green. You could have, a Bryce Harper, one of these like superstar guys that have been taken out of high school. And I wouldn't even want to hold back on whether or not I consider Riley Green a superstar, but maybe he is. Maybe people think he is. I don't know. Either way, uh, what this does signal to me, though, one way or the other, is it's sort of this weird mixed message where, like, on the one hand, it's like, look at our young core; they're blossoming. We're spending on Colt Keith. We're kind of getting close to where we're almost above 500 again. Maybe we'll make a run for this wild card spot, or at least make things interesting for the summer. But then on the other end, it's like we're still far away. We're going to draft a high schooler. We're going to let this play out, and we'll be competitive, 2-3 years from now. And that does give insight into what the GM is thinking one way or the other, because maybe he just believes that this guy is the best player. And I don't know. I'm going to be honest. Like, people who are celebrating this or disparaging this, look, short of you being a real baseball mind, short of you being a real scout who's actually watched high school baseball, I'm going to be honest. I don't watch high school baseball. I don't watch minor league baseball, right? I don't know anything about this guy. And even if I did watch minor league baseball or high school baseball, that tells me nothing about how he's going to play when he's a Detroit Tiger. If he's a Detroit Tiger, right? Like, he might not make the team, right? Or we might trade him. I don't know. Like, so I guess my point here is that when you get mixed messages from a front office, I guess my default is to assume the more like if they thought they were going to be ultra competitive this year, which they right now they're the hottest team in baseball. But if they thought that they were going to be, quote unquote, the hottest team in baseball going into the All-Star break, they would have made more moves, right? And they wouldn't have probably drafted a high school player because they would have thought, well, we want a guy who can come up next year. And maybe by some miracle this guy does. I don't think that's even really possible, but maybe by some miracle he does. And in this case, it sort of feels like how when they took Max Clark, where it's like, okay, all right, now I understand we're in this for the long haul, and that tells me come trade deadline, I don't know if Tarek Skubal is still going to be on the team. I don't know if Jack Flaherty is still going to be on the team, or Carson Kelly, or Jason Foley, or Mark Canner, or Gio Rochelle, any of these guys who you could see be on the move. And the reasoning for that is because, well, they're telling you, right? They're telling you, okay, we're taking another high school guy. He's not going to be up for, another 2-3 years at the least. So right now we're in the asset collection. We're seeing what we have, and what they see probably is, Riley Green is a stud, Torkelson. Tarek Skubal is a stud, and Colt Keith could be a stud in the making. So it's hard for me to get like, oh, are we a wild card team? Are we gonna make the wild? Are we gonna make a run for the play? It's hard for me to get into that mindset when it's like they're taking another shortstop that's a high schooler. And not, again, this is not me saying that this player is going to suck. I have no idea if this player is going to suck or be good. I hope he's, Derek Jeter. I hope he's, the best shortstop ever. The point is, what this tells me as far as the state of the team goes, or at least as far as what Scott Harris and Greenberg think, is this team is not yet ready to compete, and that's probably true. So expect some selling at the deadline. And that might be hard to hear, but I think it's the truth. I think that Scott Harris has not really lied, in so much as, he hasn't said one thing and done another. But either way, if he's right, then, maybe we're competitive over the next, late 2020s, right? Like we're a perennial World Series contender. We're like, trying to think of a comparable team. We're like the Astros, right? Where they just kept drafting all these guys, they kept picking up all these guys, making these moves, and they all sort of came up around the same time. Maybe not all at the same time, but around the same period, to the point where, you have Correa coming up. I think you have Altuve was probably the first one who came up, and then you have your Correas, you have your Bregmans, and then you bring in the Verlanders of the world, and all of a sudden, look out, here come the Houston Astros. Maybe that's the thought, or like the Chicago Cubs, in the 2010s, with Schwarber and Javi Baez, and all those guys, right? I don't know. I guess, and I hate to be in that position. I like to at least try to offer the people something in terms of some, like, you can look at this and maybe this is going to be successful, or like provide some example. But to me, it's like I I just don't. I got nothing in terms of, like, right now, as fun as it is and as enjoyable as maybe it has been the past couple of games, couple of series here. I think realistically, probably gonna fall on its face. And even if it doesn't, I think it might be, reality might set in, and we're gonna see guys like Flaherty, potentially guys like Scooble, depending on the offer, on the move come July 30th. It sucks, but if you trade those guys and you pick up a haul, and all of a sudden, into next year and the year after that, you've got just the top three. You got like a top three, like maybe even the number one. Like, you look like the Baltimore Orioles in a couple of years. Man, all I'm saying is, if you believe in the guy, if you believe in Harris, and I have no reason to say that he's, a complete failure. I've had a lot of question marks, but things could turn around quickly. I mean, you see it a lot in sports. So it all depends on whether or not you got the right guy in charge, and we won't know until we know. Hi, it's me again. If you enjoyed what you just saw, hit the like and subscribe button. We do live shows every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there.